You know, I'm Kevin. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Kevin.
You know, you're going first next. Right. I'm aggravating you. So service, 12 concepts. Service manual. Boring. Hey, listen, and we're going to talk about some service, we're going to talk about service, and I'm going to talk about, again, the theme with me is being able to find myself in those books. It was once I found myself in the steps, in the big book, it became easier to do what it suggested. When I found myself in the traditions and being able to apply those outside of Alcoholics Anonymous, it became easier to accept them. The concepts were no different. And when you read those concepts, you'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't relate to anything it's saying. And I was the same way. I'm going to share one experience on when I realized that the concepts were being applied in all of my affairs without realizing it. And now I realize it in so many other ways. And I'm only going to use one concept to give that example, because I was just telling Jimmy, if I get to talking too much about the concepts, I could talk an hour or longer just on concept 6. And I'm not going to get too deep into it. Instead, I want to talk a little bit about service work, which that's why we have the concepts. So, and they give me this guideline, this basis of what it is to serve and what it means to serve and how can I best serve and what should I look like as a leader in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because whether you're washing ashtrays, or whether I'm chairing a meeting in my home group, or whether I'm a GSR, the Grand Supreme Ruler of my group, a DCM, or just, it doesn't matter. We have a lot of leaders in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I used to have a hard time wrapping my head around being a leader, of what it meant to be a leader. And do we really even have leaders in Alcoholics Anonymous? And I had to go back to the very first time that I walked into a meeting in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that person that was sitting up there chairing that meeting, I thought it was an AA god. I thought that this is the person that runs AA. They were viewed as a leader in my eyes. And then I find out that they'd only been sober a couple of months, you know what I mean? But I didn't know that. So it's not about my perception and how, if I view myself as a leader or not. It's about how other people look at me that walk in, right? We just talked about this unity and what kind of AA do I want? And I can't be willing to do for somebody else to do something if I'm not willing to do it myself. You know, it's all just entangles and it comes together so perfectly imperfect. I can't think of a better way to describe it, because there are imperfections. There is the gray areas that Jimmy just talked about. There's some things that, you know, we really have to sit down together and discuss and talk about and get some things ironed out and worked out for the good of AA. Understanding as a delegate that when I was elected to go to the General Service Conference, that it wasn't my job or my responsibility to go to this General Service Conference and represent Area 1, Alabama, Northwest Florida. It wasn't to vote in their, I mean, yes, I'm representing them, but it wasn't to vote in their best interest. It dang sure wasn't to vote in Kevin's best interest. My responsibility was to vote on matters that's best for AA as a whole. And sometimes that meant going against my area's group conscience. Just once. But see, then the great thing happens. I come back and I get this report and I get to tell them that I did that. And this is why I did it. And everyone is okay with it. Because you're viewed as a leader. You're elected in that position to delegate, to make those decisions. You gather more information as things come. And they come pretty fast in that 7 days that you're in New York. It's almost daylight to dark of just 7 days or 6 days of nothing but just, you're sitting in a room and you're going over, y'all see the agenda items? So, service work. You know, for me, it was the first key that I ever got after I got sober to go on this empty key ring that I had was the key to my home group. After a couple of weeks, you know, this guy named Ivan, he gave me a key to my home group. And it meant so much that someone trusted me that didn't know me to give me a key to this run-down, beat-up old building. But I was grateful for it, and in my mind, I wasn't going to do anything to lose it. I lost enough keys in my life that I wasn't going to lose this one. And I had so much gratitude in my heart for that. And then I found out, hell, everybody had a key. He just wanted me to come in because I was getting there 2-3 hours early before the meeting. I didn't have a job, right? I had to depend on rides to get there. So if they could only get me there 3 hours early, then I'd sit and wait on someone. He just wanted me to be able to get in and make coffee, which was my introduction to service work. It was a bun coffee maker. You had to have a coffee pot underneath it as you poured the water in. I didn't know this. I learned very quickly. Ivan sat there and watched me do it and let me clean it up. But I learned. He let me make a mistake. And then it started hitting me that these people loved me enough to let me fall like this. Even though it's just a small thing, it still, to this day, it sticks out. Because throughout the years, there's been so many people through service work who have loved me so much to let me hurt. There have been people in my life who have prayed that I experience complete and utter hopelessness, and I did. And it's beautiful. What waits on the other side is this almighty loving hope that I have in my life today as a result of those things. It's through that service work that I was able to do the same thing for my youngest son and pray for that he gets to experience complete and utter hopelessness, and then to allow him to fall and hurt and experience it. Because the beauty that I see today in that child, it's worth it. It's worth it. It's not easy as a parent. You want to pick your children up. You don't want to see those things. But my God, who are we to get in the way of God's consequences? Someone let him let me suffer. And I'm so grateful for that. All of these things that I have in my life today started with service work. You heard me say it took me 3 years to work steps because I heard things in the meetings. Just go to meetings, right? Meeting makers make it. Chair a few meetings, show up on cleanup days, clean some ashtrays. That to me, that was service work. And in some form it is. It's some things that need to be done around my home group. In some capacity, it was service work. But at the time, it was, to me, service work. And I get elected as a GSR a little later, and I go to area assembly, and I start finding out that there's this whole big old world outside of what happened at the time, New Life Group in Oxford, Alabama. There was this whole big world of AA that I had no idea about. And the fights that almost broke out at these area service assemblies, it just attracted me so much. Yeah. That's the truth. That was very attracting. I was just waiting on somebody to throw some fists. Because I'd have been standing on a chair, get it, boy. That's just, yeah. I couldn't wait to be part of that. And I couldn't wait to go back and to keep going back. And I missed my daughter's junior prom. They're Irish twins, 10 months apart, right? I missed their junior prom because I was at an area assembly in April. And their senior year rolled around. As I was my group GSR, I approached my sponsor and I says, Brittany and Tessa's prom is this coming weekend. And he said, okay. I said, well, we've got area assembly. He says, well, you don't go. You get your alternate to go. Or ask your alternate to go is how he put it. And I says, I already have. They can't go. He says, then your group just doesn't get a vote. And that's the first time I'd heard that. And I said, what are you talking about? My group does not get a vote. And he is the one who pointed out to me that it's not AA's intent or purpose to take us away from our families more than drinking. We don't want our families to resent AA more than they did alcohol. The whole point of these principles is to reinstitute us into the lives of those very people who we destroyed. We are not going to destroy them more by not being there or being present. You have your ass at that prom. And that was a message that resonated with me and still resonates with me today. And to be there and to be present in those people's lives is all a result of all 36 of these principles. But being able to see those and apply them outside the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous is truly what the whole program is about. When we talk of service and recovery and unity. It's easy to come in here with like-minded people and be of service. It's easy to come in here with like-minded people and be unified sometimes. But when my wife and I aren't seeing eye to eye, it's a little bit harder sometimes at home to be unified. When we disagree on what should happen with one of our children, it's a little bit more difficult to be unified. But what we both understand because of this program is that when we are, everyone wins. When we are unified, our children win. She and I win. And it sets this example for our kids going forward. I talk about my kids like they're little. I mean, my God, my oldest one's my baby will be 29 in October. But the oldest, she's 33, just turned 33. Anyway, I know I'm going. I said I wasn't going to talk that long. But this is where it's going. So it's what it is. And then to be elected to represent Area 1, and Jimmy can tell you, it's a feeling to sit there and when you hear your name called out off of those ballots. How did I even get here? Started with a key. What service work in Alcoholics Anonymous has allowed me to do is to get out of what Kevin wants, or when Kevin wants it. Without even realizing it early on, I was already thinking of others. I was beginning to lose some of that selfishness and self-centeredness, and I realized that when it talks about losing selfishness and self-centeredness, it's not because I think of myself less, it's because I think of God and others more. And I wanted those ashtrays to be so clean when they come back in. If they wanted to eat out of them, they'd eat out of them. It was about, like I said, I didn't want to do anything to lose that key, except work the steps, my God. But I did eventually, and we're going to talk about those. But real quick, I'm going to share this little story about a concept. I know I talked about a lot of things there, but so how do I see myself in the concepts? And this is a story, and it hit me at the strangest time, and they still do. And you'll be like, oh, that's this concept. But my wife had sent me to the grocery store with a list of grocery items to get a few years ago. And as I'm going through the store, I'm getting everything that's on the list. However many ounces it said, I'm getting the exact thing she said to get. If it said great value, I got great value. Except the ketchup. I'm not bending on Heinz ketchup. We're not bending on Heinz ketchup. So she had on her list, she had 24 ounces of Heinz ketchup. I'm digging it, okay. But when I get over to the ketchup aisle, they had the 48-ounce bottle that was 30 cents more than the 24-ounce bottle. So I'm getting twice the amount of product for 30 cents more. And it makes logical sense economically, financially, responsibly, as the adult who's buying these grocery items, that we get the larger quantity of ketchup for just 30 cents more, because in the long run it's going to make more sense and it's going to save us some money. So I get the 48-ounce bottle of ketchup, and as I'm approaching to check out, I'm saying, that's right, I got the big bottle, and she's going to be happy about it. And it hit me, concept 3, which is the right of decision. Just because my wife gave me this grocery list and sent me to the grocery store and wanted these specific items, when I got to the grocery store and I seen that this double the size of ketchup was only 30 cents more, then it makes so much more sense, because I got more information when I got to the grocery store. I have it's right in front of me, and I'm going to do a good thing by her, by our finances, and by our family. It just makes more sense to do that, and it's going to save us some money in the long run. That was concept 3, the right of decision. And when I got home and told her about it, she was, I'm not going to say she was like super, she didn't do backflips, but she was like, oh, that's cool, yeah, okay. Because she knows the concepts are boring. But she thought it was pretty cool that I was able to save a little bit of money and get the double amount of ketchup. But see, it's the same thing when I go to the General Service Conference. Just because my area sends me to the conference with this list of agenda items and their group conscious on every single one of those items, if I get there and there's something that's going to be financially irresponsible for us to do in AA, it's not only my right, it's my responsibility as your delegate to stand up for it. And then come back and tell you about it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Jimmy Alcoholic again. Concepts. I got invited to talk about these at our SASA, the Southern States of Alcoholics Anonymous Service Assembly we had last year, and I had 15 minutes to do concepts 7, 8, and 9. Impossible. So now I got 20 minutes to do all 12. So that's great. So needless to say, we're gonna glide around somewhere at about 100,000 feet and take a look at these things. But we'll kind of zoom in on a couple of things that I think are really relevant and important, and I might even go so far as to say they're not quite as boring as the concepts are made out to be. So what was, as I look at the concepts in general overall and think, well, what's the point, you know? And I think the best way, especially coming away from the experience of serving at the General Service Conference this year, and it was my first time, I was a brand new baby delegate, and I go up there and armed with the information, right? And it's a lot of information. We get the background stuff in February, and that was around 600 pages. And then for delegates, you end up getting the conference manual and then other materials that are specific to your committee. So all told, I probably had about 1,500 pages worth of material to read and familiarize myself with before getting there. And then we got more once we got there. So it's a lot. It's a lot of information. And if I'm committed to doing right by this job and right by those I serve, then I'm going to read that stuff. I'm going to make doggone sure that when I walk in there, I'm as well informed as I can be, because I mean to be part of an informed conversation about this stuff, not reading anything and going in there and sitting down and expecting to be, struck by the Spirit in the moment to make the best decision. It doesn't work like that for me. So when I look at these things, kind of, starting in concept 1, it's like, who's in charge? That's what concept 1 is to me in the shortest form. Who's in charge? And the answer to that question is the groups. But we all know, kind of very similar to the way our society is structured in a democratic form of government, I mean, would we ever be able to get anything meaningful accomplished for our country if every single person in this room and in the whole country had a voice and a vote in every single decision that was made for every law that ever got passed, we'd never get anything done, right? So what's kind of the next best thing, right, is that we elect delegated representatives who we hope are going to listen to us, right? They're going to listen to our viewpoints and opinions, and they're going to take all that into consideration when they go and they come together as a body to try to make decisions. And that leads us right to concept 2. The fellowship, collectively, the members of Alcoholics Anonymous, through their groups, delegate the authority to make decisions for Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole to the General Service Conference. And that's what my job is right now for those of you who are in Area 64, the state of Tennessee. That's my job right now. And so, and Kevin mentioned concept 3, and that's one of those things where now I get to dive down a little bit and talk about, well, what's this whole right of decision business, and how is that going to manifest itself? How's that mean anything to me as a home group member, as a regular old AA member in my home group? Well, I love the story about the ketchup, by the way. I was really expecting you to get home and get scolded because the bottle was too big to fit in the refrigerator or something like that. But alas, you did good. You did good. So, for instance, spoke with a gentleman earlier back there. He's an intergroup rep for his group. So he's tasked, I'm sure, with going to the intergroup meeting as frequently as they're had every month. We have them every month down in Chattanooga. So you go there, and that's where all of the local groups, where their representatives come together. And it's, kind of similar to the way the conference is. The conference delegates come together to make decisions for Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole in the United States and Canada. Well, our intergroups come together, right? Our group representatives and district representatives come together to talk about the things that matter to our local areas, right? And we make decisions for our local area as a whole. Excuse me. And so when my intergroup rep or my home group goes to the intergroup, we're generally aware, because they're regularly participating, kind of the things that are going on. What's going to come up in conversation? What are we going to need to vote on? And they'll say, well, this is something that's pretty important. We might want to say, hey, let's postpone this one and take it back and see what our groups think. We need a little more feedback from our group before we can address this one. But oftentimes it's, hey, we're going to talk about this thing. I've already talked to my group about it, and I know how they feel. And a lot of times they've made it abundantly clear to me exactly how they feel, and many will say they expect me to vote a certain way on a certain thing. But I get to the store, and I've got my very specific instructions, and I see the bigger bottle of ketchup that's only 30 cents more, and it's like, what do I do? Do I make the decision to follow the instructions specifically as they've been given to me, or do I take the new information that's been presented into consideration and make the best informed decision that I can in that moment? That's where right of decision comes in. That's where that elected representative, that trusted servant who we delegated that authority to go and on behalf of our group be our voice and our vote in that situation, they're going to come in and consider all of the information presented in that moment, along with the conversation, the viewpoints and opinions of our group, and they're going to make a decision. And sometimes I've seen it happen in service where, and I'm sure this is going to come as a shock to everybody in this room because nobody in here suffers from an ego, that people get elected into certain positions, and AA has no monopoly on this. We see it play out in society all over the place. Somebody gets elected to a position where it's supposed to be a trusted servant, right? We hear things like servant leadership thrown around, It's important. And I think, that's how we should be. But unfortunately, we're human and our egos get in the way. And so there's we attach some kind of prestige to this thing. And like the late, great Dr. Harry Tebow told us, talked about the resurgence of the ego in the alcoholic, and ours, it's amazing how that happens when I'm sitting in the middle of a business meeting and I'm the one in charge. I represent my group. And I made the decision, and you're just going to have to live with it because I know better. That's not how that works. The essay on Concept 3 and Right of Decision closes with, this right of decision should never be used as an excuse for a failure to render full reports of all important decisions made. So like Kevin said, my responsibility doesn't end with going to the meeting and casting my vote. I then have the duty to come back and in full transparency share exactly what happened, exactly how I voted, and tell why I voted the way I did. And that's how we close the loop, right? And I got to do that. I'm going to leave here and go down to Nashville at Dalewood United Methodist after this at 3:30. And for about 3 hours, I'm going to give a report back from the General Service Conference this year. And that's my job. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell everything that happened, exactly how I voted, and why I voted the way I did. And I've done several of these already, and I've received feedback. Every member doesn't agree with every single way I voted on every single item. It's just not going to happen. But I can stand in front of everybody with a clear conscience, knowing that I educated myself on the information that was available. I studied these concepts so that I would understand as best I could the assignment and what my job was, and I went in there and did my job, and now I'm going to finish my job by telling exactly what happened. And I think that, for me, helps to kind of close that loop, and I think I've been able to talk to folks who are on completely opposite sides of any given issue, completely opposite. And yet they both can respect the decision that was made because they trust a trusted servant to go and do what's right based on the information they've been given. I've said that phrase a couple times now, and I feel called to speak to it. You hear the phrase thrown around in Alcoholics Anonymous, trust your trusted servants. I would say generally, yes, we should do that. But please don't ever just blindly trust your trusted servant, no matter how much you think of them. Because transparency and accountability are paramount to building trust. And if someone is a quote-unquote trusted servant, and their behavior is such that they're not transparent and unwilling to be accountable to those they serve, then I would submit to you that servant is not so trusted. So again, I go back to this, and sometimes the way it actually plays out doesn't fit the ideal. The ideal being this upside down triangle where the groups are on the top, right? Groups are in charge. They delegate authority to their GSR that goes to the DCM, and really the GSRs to the delegate and the delegate to the conference. Like, that's the way it's supposed to work. Unfortunately, similar to the experiences that we've had in making our groups a safe place for an alcoholic to come and get sober, right? The challenges we have with outside influences coming in and kind of mucking that up a little bit. Same kind of stuff happens in general service. So to the greatest degree that we can, for us to get together and have these conversations and talk about it, and everybody understand, where their seat on the bus is at, let's do that. Let's talk. We need to talk to better understand that. I'm probably talking way too long. I'm gonna jump now to concept 9, and this is one of my favorite ones, and Kevin touched on it earlier a little bit when he talked about leadership. Bill wrote that essay on concept 9 in around 1958, I believe it was. It was an article he wrote for the Grapevine called Leadership in AA, Ever a Vital Need. And that ended up being a large part concept 9 in the concepts. So, we talk about, hammered out on the anvils of experience when it comes to our traditions and how those kind of came to be. And Bill started writing about those in the Grapevine. You can read about them in Language of the Heart too. in the 40s, right in the mid 40s, when he starts, he's kind of putting his thoughts on paper and pitching them out to the fellowship and just kind of seeing what happens. And then eventually those were codified at the International Convention in 1950 and so on and so forth. Well, our concepts similarly hammered out on the anvils of experience from the first General Service Conference in 1951 as they go along. And Bill wrote those things, those essays, and he called it the Third Legacy Manual. And that was these. But it's similarly hammered out on the anvils of experience. But he put in here in this Concept 9 and talking about leadership and what makes a good leader. Vision. He talks about vision in there. And one of the things that I like the most about that, and it's funny, the things I like the most about our literature that I've read are the ones that challenge me the most, or that I find the most challenging to practice. And so this one's been the one about our critics. That's a hallmark of good leadership, is a willingness to listen to your critics, right? That goes back to old St. Francis again, right? Seeking to understand. With the harshest critics, can I listen to what they say? Can I listen to the message and ignore the delivery of the messenger? That's a lot easier when it's really good-natured and we're all on the same page, right? And there's, little criticisms like, hey, I really love you, but I see this differently, and here it is. Versus, you're going to destroy Alcoholics Anonymous, and here's how. Of course not. Yeah, never. We're not erratic, erstwhile alcoholics, are we? So that's one of those things that just through the experience of being involved in service in Alcoholics Anonymous and being able to take the lessons I've learned with learning how to adult, right, in AA, and learn how to play nice with others, and to carry that experience out into my personal and professional life, and learn how to be a leader, to be someone who can, come alongside folks. Can you lead folks in a way that you're coming alongside them and seeing eye to eye in them, or with them, or are you a dictator? One of the most important aspects of leadership for me, Bill articulates in the closing of the essay on Concept 9. And I know a lot of y'all in here have probably read it, but I would encourage anybody who hasn't ever read it, you can go look up the essay. You can Google it in Leadership in AA, Ever a Vital Need, and it'll pull up on the internet. Or if you got a service manual, I'm sure everybody in here's got one of those, right? You can look it up in Concept 9. But Bill closes that essay on leadership talking about sponsorship. And he says of sponsorship that's one of the most important leadership roles that any of us could ever have. And all of us have a responsibility as recovered alcoholics. If you've come in here and you've had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, then if you're really going to do the deal, you got to carry this message. And that means you're going to be talking to other alcoholics. And Bill says of sponsorship that often life and death hangs in the balance. How the sponsor makes their presentation, the timing, how the sponsor relates themselves to both the prospect and to the family. All of these things can make the difference, and often the difference between life and death. And so in that sense, I would submit to you that every single member of Alcoholics Anonymous who has come to Alcoholics Anonymous and had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, you're a leader whether you want to be or not. And going back, I feel like I'm kind of preachy because I say this a lot. Our only reason for existence is to help drunks. That's it. It's the only reason we're around. The Washingtonians tried to do it and were doing a really good job till they got tied up with other stuff. They let other stuff creep in there and they faded off the scene. The Oxford group, a little bit different, but similarly, it kind of faded away. We spun out of that and came up with our own thing, and it's worked really, really well for a long time. And part of the reason for that, I think, is because underneath it all, at the foundation of it all, is universal spiritual principles rooted in love for one another. And if we can remember that and take all of that to heart and commit to being that example of love and service to anybody that we meet, remembering that as long as we're inclusive to all who suffer, we cannot fail to be diverse in Alcoholics Anonymous. We're going to be, as long as we're inclusive to every single drunk that walks through the door looking for help with a drinking problem. And I think that's probably one of our biggest challenges. That one, how well we're doing that, and I know a bunch of you are doing a fantastic job of it, and how we communicate with one another. And that's it.
Thank you.
Amy Spain Duncan, alcoholic. Thank you, gentlemen, both of you, so much for kind of carrying some of that. So I got my first service manual this year, and my sponsor suggested that I get it, and I start looking at it. So I wanted these guys to go first. I've been an IGR. I've done service, at a local level and for Alcoholics Anonymous worldwide. But I went to an area meeting, and like Kevin, I saw these like tensions of the fight, and I thought, I'm no good here. I'll swing. Like, I don't belong here. I'll get in your fight, But I got to go to him. I just wasn't spiritually well enough to be, where an argument ensued, because like Kevin, I'm going to be on the chair. I want in the fight. But I got to see some of that, and what I noticed about the men and women there was this experience and this humility and this passion for what they were doing and how they carried it forth. So I wanted to thank both of these guys who've been kind of further up than IGR and done those things, because it's so important to what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. But if we all have an assignment, we all have an assignment. Some of the greatest service work in Alcoholics Anonymous is done at the door by the greeter. Some of the greatest service work in Alcoholics Anonymous is the guy with a few weeks sober who's opening up and making coffee, right? And when we talk about that level of service in our home groups at a local level and sponsorship, I do, I've been doing that from the beginning. It's what I do, and it's where the magic is, right? I got kind of nervous when you were talking about, life and death hangs in the balance. I'm not qualified. Holy crap, that sounds important. And so what we have to do is, my ego will read that and think it's all up to you, Amy, and you're an idiot. There's a problem, right? So I have to leave space for grace, and I have to leave space for love, and I have to leave space for the magic that is the spirit that moves among us, right? But in our work and in our literature, it talks about fitting myself for maximum service. How do I fit myself for this assignment? A perfectly imperfect human being full of flaws and ego and fear-driven in every turn. How do I fit myself for this? I don't have to wait 15 years, 20 years to sponsor women, right? If I do, I probably won't be here in 15 or 20 years. Right, I'm not going to make it that long. I want to talk a little bit about service and old timers and the more experienced members. So I'm bouncing in and out of AA. I don't know what to do. And they assigned a lady, this poor lady, she drew the short straw. And she was in charge of me that day to try to get me from the morning meeting to the night meeting without a drink. And I twitched a little bit, and I talked real fast and real loud, and I was in your face, and what do you want to do next? I don't know what you want to do. I don't know what to do. She's driving, and I've wore her out, man. And we're pulling up to her house to get lunch, and we're at a stoplight. And she said, Amy, the funniest thing happened the other day. A special needs adult was trying to cross at this intersection to get to their job at Kroger. They're from my neighborhood, and I was watching them, and the light wouldn't change. And I sat here, and they had pressed the crosswalk button, and it wasn't changing, and I could tell they were frustrated and confused. And I was so worried that they were just going to try to cross the street dangerously and to get to work. And I said, oh, that sounds terrible. What happened? She said, well, he finally made it across the street, but that's been on my mind. And what I really wanted to do was check these crosswalks and make sure they worked. And but I haven't had time. And I said, well, I have time. All I have is time. I'll check the crosswalks. This is an important assignment that people have to get to work. They have to get to work safely. I have nothing else to do. I could do it. She said, oh, would you? Absolutely. Absolutely. How many should I check? Oh, just as far as you can walk. Well, what do I do? What do I do if they don't work? She said, I'm going to give you my phone, and you're going to call 311. That's the city number, and you'll report it, and they'll come out and fix it. Absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to do that. Wow, this is super. And she said, I'm going to go on to my house, and I'll make lunch, and I'll wait for you to get back. Okay. So you're going to be all right. Absolutely, absolutely. Buddy, I want to tell you, nobody worked harder at checking crosswalks that day but me. I had my phone up to 3-1. I was ready. I was going to I would push the button, and I would wait, and I would time it, and I would look, and people on the street were like, what is this crazy lady doing? I'm checking the crosswalk so that people can get to work. It's very important what I'm doing today. I walked probably 12 blocks down, and then I crossed the street, and I checked them all on the other side. Each one diligently, I'd look, and I'd wait. Okay, that one works. Okay, that one. And I did it, and I get back to her house about an hour and a half later, and I'm hot and sweaty and tired. And she said, how'd it go? I said, well, it's weird. They're all working. She said, really? I said, yeah. She said, well, thank goodness. I feel better that you did that. It's like, yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do it. I was glad to be able to do it, you know. Yeah, the ninja power of the old timer, right? She made me feel useful once more. No matter how ridiculous the task, really, she just needed a break, and they had to give me some. Right? And I didn't get it. I wasn't aware enough to catch on to what was happening. And it was years later, she sent me a picture of the workers at the light, and she said, "I told you those things were broken." You know, God qualifies the called. And when you're answering the call of Alcoholics Anonymous, this journey into service, trusted servitude, servant leadership, when you're willing to make yourself available for the greater good, it does not rely on you, thank God, right? The prayer you pray, the parking lot prayers, the things that, when I show up, thank God I'm not bringing just Amy, or we're screwed, right? When I show up, I'm bringing a connection to source and power that I have found through Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm bringing the love and kindness and tolerance and patience you have shown me, right? When I read our book one day, it says patient, or what does it take? Our code. Love and tolerance is our code. And I remember I looked at the girl next to me. I said, I'm screwed. It's their code. Like, they're going to kick me out right away. Like, that's the code. Because I knew I didn't possess any love or tolerance. And it's the code. And how do you live by something you don't have? But what I found in Alcoholics Anonymous is I showed up with an empty cup. And you filled it. You showed me love and tolerance. And so then I had a little bit I could scrape out of the bottom to hand to the next woman. It doesn't, while it relies on us and we have a responsibility and we have a duty, my duty and my job in Alcoholics Anonymous at this point is to grow in effectiveness and understanding. To grow in effectiveness and understanding. And that means I've got to keep learning. That means I got to read that dang World Service Manual they gave me. Avoided that for 14 years, right? But if I want to be a part of this and I want to bring the best of me, that is you, right, to these situations to be more effective and understanding, this is my responsibility. And it starts with the key to the home group. It starts with making coffee. one of the things I had a car. It wasn't a great car. It was an early sobriety car. So the liner hung down, but I couldn't cut it off because then foam would drop. So it was just kind of like a swing, like a hammock full of foam above your head. And the air didn't work and the radio didn't work. It was a little Ford Taurus and I think I paid $400 for it. And it was my first car in recovery. I can tell you that 4 different times we were pulled over because there were too many people in it. We looked like a clown car showing up, right? We'd have like women sit, it was bucket seats, and there'd be 4 deep and then a second row on top of the laps of the women on it, and I'm driving like this because I got 4 in the front seat, and we would get pulled over, but we were going to meetings. And I was the guy with the car. And so I would practice getting the car AA. And I would show up and we would pile in. And we'd pull together $2 or $3 for gasoline. And we'd go to a meeting. And then we'd go back home. That's service in Alcoholics Anonymous. Right? My favorite thing is Shoemaker, and it's stand by the, my place is by the door. I stand by the door. And that's my favorite job in Alcoholics Anonymous is to find your hand and connect it to the hand of a loving and merciful God that's going to help you. And I don't have to be perfect to do that. Like I told you guys, I 12 stomped women. Who knows where those poor ladies are today. I was not a good representative of Alcoholics Anonymous. You want to live or you want to die? What's your choice to be? The book tells me on to the next one, I was not. But we grow in effectiveness and understanding along the path of this deal. And the more I read that book, I was reading, I think I was in A Vision for You, but it was talking about when Bill and Bob would start going to the hospital, right? And they were looking for the man on the bed, the third man, Dobson, and the nurse says, "We've got him strapped down to a bed. I'm a nurse. I know what 5-point restraints means for a human being." And that's the condition they found Dobson. And they say, "Move him to another room and we'll be back." They didn't do it that day. "We'll be back." And when they get back, the man on the bed says, "What am I doing here? I've never been in a private room before. Who are you people?" And that's what they want to know when they meet us. Who are you people? And there we are. And they visited with him. And a few days later, they returned, right? They're not doing all this in one meeting. When I was sponsoring, I wanted you to get sober and be where you were supposed to be and think like you were supposed to think and have a psychic change in a week. Because I've given you the information. What's wrong with you? Catch up, But the way we allow for people to digest and grow and make their mistakes and suffer their mistake. Like we don't learn from the mistake. We learn from the consequences of the mistake. As Scott told me yesterday, he's right. The mistake's not where I learn the consequences of the mistake, but in here is my growth and development. In here is where, as a baby, fledgling member of Alcoholics Anonymous, still full of fear, still fighting ego, still trying to find my footing and my place in this magical world you've invited me to, is grace. So Amy can fall short, and she will. And I always say grace will cover the spread, right? Grace is going to cover the spread. So do your best every day. Be honest. Be transparent. Be accountable. Be willing to learn. Train your feet to be at our door, to make our coffee, to put away the chairs. God will take care of the rest, right? The keep it simple part of this deal. I'm grateful for the men and women who can read 15,000 pages of, that sounds horrible.
1,500.
I'm like, God bless you, sir, right? But we all have an assignment in Alcoholics Anonymous. We all have a job, but it's not fair of me to leave that to make it his responsibility and not even educate myself on what my delegate is doing. and respect and honor that, and show that respect and honor and gratitude to each member, whether it's the guy with too much sober who showed up 3 hours early to make the coffee. I need to thank him. I need to thank him for the service in Alcoholics Anonymous, and then I have to find a place where I can be of service. My friend Tim Hyland says, in Alcoholics Anonymous, we all come in takers, because I'm dying, and I need what you have. But this magic thing happens, and we become givers. And that's when you know the guy's going to be okay. That's when you know the guy's got a shot, the new man or the new woman, when you see them giving acts of service within Alcoholics Anonymous, whether it's giving the guys a ride, making the coffee, volunteering, IGR. I'm a pretty good IGR. I don't think I could do as well with GSR. IGR, I know those guys, and we sit in those chairs, and through COVID we had to be 6 feet apart, and it was crazy, and it's good that I know my home group, and so if you want it, I think that any of us, I honestly do think it takes a special person to be a DCM or an area rep or that kind of thing. These guys, man, the time and dedication and willingness they are for the things that we never see. Right? Most of us never see that as normal AA members. I think that's incredible. But have a home group, and go to the business meeting. I have a large home group, and there'll be 9 of us at the business meeting. But at the meeting, when we say home group members, raise your hand, looks like we are 50, 60 strong. And then at the business meeting, there'll be 10 to 15 of us. Pull back the curtain, walk back, at least visit there and find out if it is for you. It may be exactly where you need to be. So don't miss that opportunity and the way we get to grow in effectiveness and understanding. But I sponsor a lot of women. We get through the 12 steps, and I'm like, great, we need to get you a sponsee. And they're like, I'm not ready. Yes, you are. Sometimes you got to push the little bird out of the nest. And you say, I'll be here to help you. And it's not just me. It's me, and it's my sponsor, and it's her sponsor, and it's Diane, and it's Renee, and it's this worldwide fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I was on the streets, and if I wanted to scare you, I would say, I look like I'm here alone, but I'm never alone. Meaning that I had backup, that there were people in the shadows, waiting to come get you. Whether it was true or not, I did that. There's power in numbers, and as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, whatever you're doing, take us with you. Take us with you. Do the parking lot prayer. Bring God into it, and do your best. And if the bottom line is love, grace will cover the spread. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.